Hello, my name is Christopher Gutierrez, and this is my presentation called The Subtle Symbols of War. I will be critiquing paintings by Diego Rivera and Zdzisław Beksinski. So, Beksinski was known as the Nightmare Artist. He was known for portraying a lot of really dark aspects that he had seen during his time in German-controlled Poland. He was born in 1929, and he survived World War II and Germany occupied Poland. His birth date was actually changed. He wasn't sure how old he was because they were afraid he would be going into forced slave labor if they thought that he was a different age than he was. So here we see him in front of one of his paintings and two of his other paintings on either side. So Beksinski's family life was good until it was bad. He married his wife Zofia, and they lived a very happy life until eventually she had an aortic aneurysm and died in 1998. That loss it was very tragic for him, and it plagued him until the loss of his only son, Tomas, in 1999. He committed suicide. After that, he was never the same. Now, 6 years later, in 2005, his landlord's son requested that he borrow money, and Beksinski said no, and the son stabbed him to death. So Beksinski's life, for being the nightmare artist, was equally plagued with tragedy and loss and turbulence, a lot of turbulence. You could tell that his childhood played a big role in his artwork. Equally, we have Diego Rivera. He didn't firsthand go through war and revolution, but being a Mexican national, he experienced the Mexican Revolution from afar. He was born in 1886, and he attended the San Carlos Academy of Fine Arts after he had already started drawing at the age of 10. Once he moved to Europe, he met people like Picasso and other Cubists that heavily influenced his art, and especially his choice in palette. Once he returned to Mexico, he began painting murals, and things went off from there. His personal life, he got married to Frida Kahlo, the famous painter, and they remained married until her tragic death. The Rockefellers were one of the first people to actually commission him to do a painting, the famous robber baron family. However, his personal political views played a really heavy part in that, and it actually caused him to demolish the entire mural. If you look very closely, Diego Rivera was a Marxist, and you'll find Lenin as a portrait in here, and the Rockefellers, being a staunch American family, did not like that. So a few generations down the line from the commission of the piece, they had it demolished. This is the piece I'll be reviewing. It is untitled. This is Beksinski's, one of his oil paintings from 1974. You notice it's a childlike figure standing in front of a large, shrouded, looming character, and that character is almost welcoming it to the maniacal, cackling crowd behind it. And this is the painting by Diego Rivera, currently in the online museum at LACMA. It's called Flower Day. It was painted in 1925, and it depicts a woman selling calla lilies to a group of mothers and children. So first I'd like to analyze the composition. In both paintings you have symmetry along the center line, whether it's perfect symmetry or not. There's minor differences, but for the most part it's symmetrical along the center line. You have lighting down the center, and you'll notice just the details are pretty similar. Additionally, the background in both is fairly symmetrical. You can't really tell in this, so I'll go back to the main, if I can, no. Well, in Diego Rivera's piece, the background behind the woman selling flowers is very dark. You don't see very much of it. Whereas in Beksinski's, it's the opposite. The foreground is very dark because it's backlit, and the background is more of a limited range of values, which makes those characters seem far away and almost behind it, like a smoky haze. Additionally, we can analyze the use of line. Neither Diego Rivera or Bakshchinsky in these pieces used line heavily. They chose to use value and shadow to create a sense of realism. Diego Rivera simplified his figures and exaggerated their features, but there's still, you can see the shadow that creates a 3D form within his painting, especially on the lilies, right? You can see those gray shadows delineate each lily from the next rather than having a solid black line between each flower. Bakshchinsky, he chose to go with a much softer, much more realistic uh, method of drawing and painting this piece. Yes, the figures in it are alien, nothing like human or just natural. They all look emaciated and just unnatural, unreal. But the way he uses the flow of the fabric, the details he puts in all the wrinkles, and the anatomy are all still correct, and so you can notice that they're beings of some kind. Uh, but there's no line. He uses light and shadow to cast boundaries between the characters so that you can still tell who is who and what is what, but there's no solid line between anything. Now we move on to color. The two artists couldn't have gone in more different routes for these paintings. Rivera uses rich earth tones, such as the terracotta color in the skirts, the rich browns in the skin, red tones in the skin, and then he reserves white and cream for very specific places, right? The lilies are a very bright, brilliant white. The women's dresses are a brighter cream color. And then you can't see in this slide, but in the background there are people that their features are simplified. There's not very much shadow. There's just very plain drawings. And those people are in the background for a reason, right? They don't really matter too much to this painting. Whereas Bakshchinsky, on the other hand, he chooses to go black and gray. He wants to show he grew up in a communist Poland, and one of the things of communism is conformity, right? It's a very gray, bleak landscape. There's no creativity. It's squashed where it seeps out, and so I feel that this painting really projects that. The child is dressed in all black and being welcomed by a shrouded, unidentifiable figure to this group of predatory whatevers, right? You can't really make out what they are, but they definitely don't look inviting. Whereas the figure looks authoritative and welcoming in a dark, looming sense, right? And I believe that portrays the exploitation of children within World War II and through propaganda and indoctrination. Lies were fed to a lot of the children so that in the next generation they were blind to a lot of the atrocities of war. Next, we have light. Rivera doesn't play with light too much. You can see that he does deal with shadows in certain places, but there's not a huge range of tones and values with his shadows. It's very simplified. The part where you notice the brightest highlights is the flowers, and I'd like to dive into that in the sense of that those flowers represent something good, something nice, right? Rivera painted a lot of political paintings and murals, and in a few of his most famous pieces, he depicts the nice moments in people's lives, right? This woman is work-hardened and probably very tired. She's been selling her wares. She's had to carry this big basket of flowers. But those flowers bring joy to these people, right? They're beautiful flowers. I'm sure they smell great, right? And they're all perfect. He didn't paint disfigured flowers. He painted very perfect flowers. Bakshchinsky, on the other hand, looks at the complete opposite spectrum, right? Where the Flower Day painting shows the light within the darkness, his shows the darkness within the war, right? How dark it can really be. He shows that the exploitation of children and just the real atrocities and the way that war can change people over time. That's what he chose to focus on. So in conclusion, these paintings couldn't be more different. right? They share very similar compositions. The artists both use a lack of line and choose instead for shadow and value. But the meaning behind the paintings are on complete opposite ends of the spectrum. Both artists had very political views. Um, Rivera and Beksinski both endured a lot throughout their lives, but they paint completely different viewpoints on similar topics. Thank you.